Hello, ajclubsporters. Today I would like to talk to you about suspension hydraulics and let's say this deeper dive within the suspension you asked me following the coilover video of 2 weeks ago that was quite successful. So thank you very much for the following. Everything is going much better now, and numbers are growing very much. So let's just deep dive into it immediately, and let's get to see why things work the way they do in a suspension damper and with the springs themselves. So let's start from the easy part, the springs. In fact, we have three types of springs that are the tender spring, the helper spring, and the mainspring. So the mainspring is the spring that is used to keep and sustain the weight of the car up when it's on its wheels. So there's a lot of chatter, a lot of talk about suspension, let's say Newton by millimeter hardness and strength of the springs, also on the GR, and usually I will tell you many manufacturers put very stiff springs on cars, and I will explain you why in this video so you can see the difference and choose for yourself. So basically the point is, why do manufacturers want stiffer springs on a car? For example, on a Gen 1 GR Yaris, we are talking of 36 Newton meter millimeter of stiffness on the springs front and rear. And many constructors of aftermarket coilover systems come to you with kits that go in the range between 6 and 12, sometimes even 14 140 Newton meters a millimeter. So from 36 to 120, 140, I mean, that is a big difference. But why would you want to do this? So this depends basically on two factors. The first factor may be the one of deciding where the car is used. So where the car is used means basically if on track and if on street. And from the street, obviously, rally use and all of that. Basically, people don't understand that everything away from top level track work, the car needs to have the ability to soak in the bumps, okay? So the car has got a given weight, and this weight is for each wheel, distributed about 70% and 30% in the rear on the GR Yaris. And this is what it is. So if you give me just a second, I will also give you the exact data. Exactly. So in the front, we have a wheel load of about 386 kilograms on the GR Yaris. In the rear, we have about 255, 57 kilograms, more or less. And also, in the front, we have a McPherson strut, and therefore it's linear, and the spring ratio is 1.02, basically. And in the rear, instead, we have the springs that are mounted on the suspension arm inbound towards the center of the car. Therefore, there is an angle, and this ratio is around 1.48. This means that whatever spring you install in the rear, this will be about just over half of its spring tension strength as you install it. So let's say that you have the stock springs installed, and in the front you have a wheel rate of about 35 point something Newton meters millimeter. In the rear, you have the same stock OEM 36 Newton meter springs, and the stiffness, in fact, at the wheel from that spring is 25.3. I've done the math. So you can see that immediately the wheel rate, that is the real weight that goes to the ground on the wheel, is very different. And this is okay, it's a normal thing, but also this explains why you see differentiated rates from the front and the rear, because of the weight. The weight is different, and therefore you have 257 kilos and a real wheel weight of 25 in the rear, and 386 kilos in the front, with a real wheel rate of about 35 and something Newton meters. So this compensates with a bit softer rear, because it still is a street car, and because of the weight and because of the comfort. So this is totally acceptable. So springs may be changed depending on what you are trying to achieve. If you are going at a track, on a dry track, with sticky tires or race tires, you will want to have, because you don't really care about bumps, apart from the curbs that you find around the bends, but you don't really want to compromise about bumps, and it's okay to go into wheels in certain occasions on the track. So you want the minimum chassis movement to start with. So in this way, you will have much stiffer springs. But if you are going on rally stages, or if you are just driving your car on the track, you will want less stiff, because otherwise it just will not work. Because what will happen is, as a bump arrives, the car spring will be hard, and it will make the car go up and then kick it up in the back too. And in this way, you will have a very, very crashy ride, and plus it will be very difficult to keep the adhesion of the wheels to the ground. So what are these three types of springs? The main spring, as we said, keeps up the car, and it grants the amount of movement depending on its length and its tension that it allows the car, because the spring has a mechanical limit depending, in fact, on its tension and on its rounds, and the voids between the wire itself shows you how much that spring can mechanically compress, and that is a hard limit. Whatever damper you have, the spring length and tension and free space make how much the car can compress in relation to the loads that it's seeing, statical and dynamic loads. Then we have tender springs. So tender springs are springs that are packed in line with the main spring, and they help to, let's say, put the wheel on the ground and maintain control on the wheel when the wheel is offloading, like on crests. Therefore, it helps to push the wheel down a bit more, but it has a rate that is normally about 20% of the main spring. So it's a kind of help to keep the wheels on the ground and keep the control in every moment. And usually this kind of spring is used in occasions where you have harder main springs that are not so reactive. And then you have just a helper spring. This also is used with hard springs usually, or in occasions where the packaging is so tight that you cannot, let's say, get enough droop, that is what suspension goes in when you're putting the car down on the ground. Therefore, because you don't have enough car weight to compress the mainspring enough, therefore you put a tender that compensates for that and still keeps the main spring into place. So let's now come to the main part of this video that is also the most interesting, I'm sure. So about hard and soft springs. The point is that if you have a hard spring, you will need a very good damping to go behind all the excess energy that the spring will leave out once it's being compressed. So every bump, every curve, the spring will compress, and since it's a stiff spring, it will come back to you and it will give this big shock to the system. So either you will have the car bouncing back, or you will have a good damper that is being built to deal with those specific range of forces that will keep the car in place. The whole system has to be matched, and it will be quite hard, of course. So the harder the spring, the harder the damper must be, especially in the low speeds, but we'll get to that later. So why am I so critical about dampers that are basically one-way coilover kits that are sold to enthusiasts that run these huge, let's say, very, very high rate springs? Because hydraulically, it just is very difficult to make it work, making something that is obviously compliant. So I've drawn out just a little diagram here to show you the basic working of a damper. So this is not to scale, this is just a quick draft just to show an example. But here we have a standard one or two way damper. They are both monotube, okay? And this monotube means that all the oil on all the parts inside are just working within one inner tube. So what we find on a monotube modern gas shock absorber is the oil, then we have a valve pack. This valve pack usually has got a screw, a needle that goes back up here to an adjuster. And this adjuster can be placed on top of the shock, under the shock, that's no problem whatsoever. But this is how it works. And on the other hand, throughout all this oil, we have the gas. The gas that has got a divider, and its main function is that of basically cooling down the shock itself, because oil is like the oil in an engine. Obviously, it's a different type, but what happens is that the oil itself gets hot because it's heated up by the movement. Therefore, this gas usually keeps it cooler, and it helps to maintain the let's say the viscosity of the oil more constant than not. And might I say, nowadays all good damper builders also use very liquid oil. Therefore, this issue is diminished. In the past, they used different valve packs with bigger holes, and therefore the oil was denser. And heating up, this oil became less dense, and there was an even bigger slope of performance. But the gas helps a lot in that. So what happens in a one or two way damper like this one? Why is it so difficult to make it achieve the performance of a three-way multiple valve damper? Because basically you only have one valve, that is this blue thing here, that has some holes in it in this way. The larger holes are made for the low speed bump and rebound, and the smaller holes are made for the high speed, okay? So then you have some shims, that is the shim pack on both sides, and in fact with this only package they have to do all the damping selection possible. Therefore they have to do the low speed bump, they have to do the low speed rebound, high speed bump and rebound, everything from this. So in reality, as from engineering, this is a trade-off, and it's clear, so you cannot get it all. If you add to this that not everybody, not all the tuning companies, the suspension companies are willing to put the hours and money and engineering of development behind their kits, what comes out is that you get dampers with a very narrow window of use, and this narrow window does not work for you for what you are doing. And the adjustability that you have through this adjuster, since it works on one only valve pack, what happens is that it only, let's say, changes certain characteristics of the damper. Therefore, you can go from a good ride that doesn't handle to a harsh ride that handles only in certain circumstances, and then is very harsh and all the rest. So it's very difficult if you don't put super amount of development in it. It is possible to achieve a good compromise in one or two way systems with a single tube, but it is difficult. Another matter is about packaging, and by packaging I mean space. So the fact of adding an external canister does not per se change anything to the damper, okay? It's not that the damper is better, you see it, oh yeah, how cool this is because it's got the external canister. Yeah, it looks cool, but let's understand why it's there and what it enables the damping companies to produce. So, first of all, packaging and space. Depending on the size of the damper, basically your bumper movement range is going to be limited by the packaging itself, because there is as much gas you need in it, there is as much oil, and the length of the shaft and the packaging is what you can do with it. So in the case, yeah, this is fighting with me now. In the case of this damper, depending on the physical space that the car gives you, there is only that much that you can give it as damper travel. In this case, with external reservoir, you can play around with the size of the external reservoir and give all the travel needed within the given packaging. Obviously, every car from stock has got a given packaging and a given space. For example, the GR Yaris has 205 millimeters of total travel packaging possibility in the front and 215 in the rear. Also because the car has almost no anti-squat geometry, therefore it needs to sit a lot and there is a lot of movement. Not even the stock suspension uses all of this, but it's something that is good to know because this is the maximum achievable, provided that also you are managing your wheels in the right way. Therefore, the wheel packaging movement stays within the boundaries and does not get cut upon the sheet metal above of the fender or whatever. So back to the big dampers with external reservoir or canister. These dampers, when it comes to serious work, so we said the canister per se is just added space for packaging. But when we're talking of serious dampers, both track and even more so rally spec dampers, we are talking of multiple valve packs. So let me talk to you about these technologies. So we all know that low speed bump is what affects the car's movement and the car's chassis capability of let's say retaining let's say both pitch and roll of the car itself. The rebound at low speed is the one that is more responsible for the handling feel of the car, and if it's too much it will jack a wheel down, if it's not enough it will make the handling feel sloppy. And this is the chassis movements, low speed chassis movements. High speeds is all about bumps, both in bump and rebound. So taking a bump, you say bump, and after a bump, rebound, or a pothole is also rebound in this case. So this is very difficult, but bear with me just a moment. So here we have different valve packs that manage different typologies of bumps. So we do the chassis control with one of them, low speed. We do the high speed with another, And possibly we also do hydraulic bump stop with a third one. Hydraulic bump stop, as opposed to, let's say, conventional physical bump stops, helps out very much indeed, because it smoothens out the transition between the normal damper settings of low and high speed bump to the very, very high settings that you would encounter when you get into a polyurethane bump stop, that it goes like from rigidity 1 to rigidity 100 out of 100 in basically a millisecond. And this makes your car jolt and bump. Instead, a hydraulic bump stop is very gentle, is more gentle, much more gentle, and therefore, once more, being more gentle helps you to maintain the contact patch on the ground and not to throw your car back in the air. And then on the rally damper spec, you find a lot more very, very high level, let's say, hydraulical gimmicks. So valves not always are made like this round pot with holes that I showed you, but valves are also pistons in certain cases, and they have something called frequency selective valves. So basically, this frequency selective means that basically in the mid-range of the working of the damper, when you get smaller and quicker solicitations, basically this valve closes and it enables the car to pass on to them, to take them in with the wheel. You see the WRC are going with these wheels moving very much, but the chassis is not moving. Yeah, this is part of what does this, makes it possible. So frequency selective valving. And then you have selective wheel release. So this is another valve pack that works in a way that when it senses that the wheel has lost all the grip, basically it extends very quickly the wheel back down to find contact with the ground. And by sometimes even by 10 centimeters, like on WRC cars, they just droop back down very quickly. And this helps, again, keep the wheels on the ground, on uneven terrain, and in all the situations that you could be coming from, through reaching back down to the ground from a jump and all that. Also, imagine that when you're jumping and you're coming back down, having the damper extend more with more droop and quicker gives more, let's say, bump travel to absorb the force of the whole car hitting the ground once more. And this, again, is why you see the modern WRC cars coming from these huge jumps and just landing as if they're going to get a cup of tea, you know, just like nothing, really incredible. Yeah, so these are the main specs of dampers, and why the rally dampers are so much more complicated, also the track ones, but there's nothing like a rally damper than the others. And this is why you should really look at what your use is, because even if you track your car, okay, if you track your car, but you use your car as a daily or as a commuter on the road, what you want to do is to go with a more rally-oriented damper, because you will have the same performance on the track, if not better in some cases, when the grip is not perfect. But you will have a much higher level of control of how the car works in your hands, how it slides and all that, and a much, much better ride by far, really. So this was an overview of the dampers. Let's talk about it more in the comments. Thank you very much, and thank you. I wanted to also nominate Freshness as the first member of the paying subscribers to the channel. Thank you, Freshness, for your membership. And I saw another one coming today. I still have to look into it. The YouTube doesn't make it so easy to find who it is that subscribes, but thank you very much, guys, also for the always increasing basic subscriber base, and thank you very much. I'm working hard to reply to your comments, and I'm always here to help you and sustain you in the choices you want to do about your GR Yaris. So for today, that's all. I'm gonna see you next time. Ciao.